Hello, everybody. Welcome. I'm Nicole Oliver. I am the city's Parks and Recreation Director, and we are so happy to see all of these positive energy, smiling faces, because what we're going to talk about today is an awesome topic, and it's trails. Thank you so much for being here today. We are all here because of how important it is to establish well-designed and marked trails to manage recreational use of our natural spaces, especially as we grow. This work takes time and collaboration, and today we are going to hear about the progress on trails from historic perspectives, as well as what is planned for the future. Bellingham's Greenways program acquired and built most of our community's extensive trail system, and we are so thankful for the legacy and the smartness of our community to have been voting for Greenways all this time. We are excited to host this event to focus our efforts to update existing trail plans and celebrate the opportunity that they bring. I want to thank Recreation Northwest, Todd and Elizabeth, for their help to organize and support this effort. And if you are an elected official, there was quite a few. Could you please raise your hand? Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you all for being here, and thank you for your service. And to kick us off, I'd like to welcome Mayor Kim Lund.
Thank you, Nicole. What an honor to be here to help kick things off. And truly, there's nothing better than walking into a room that has energy like this room just had before we quieted. You can tell that good things are going to come from this time together today. So I get the privilege of saying a few words, and it's so great to be here to focus on the future of regional trails in Whatcom County. It's inspiring to see so many dedicated leaders, community partners, and community members gathered in one room, many of whom have committed decades to working to make the dream of the Coast Millennium Trail a reality. And your commitment is the reason that we can envision a truly connected regional trail system. The benefits of regional trails are deep and well established. Here in Bellingham, our trail network is one of the most beloved aspects of our community, and it is used every day by residents, by families, visitors, and by commuters. And its value goes so far beyond recreation. Robust trail systems improve our public health. They help people stay active, reducing rates of depression and improving mood and cognitive function across all ages. Trails preserve our natural spaces. They safeguard our ecological systems and provide important resources, including air filtration and wildlife habitat. They are essential tools in protecting our amazing local landscapes that define this special region. And communities with strong trail systems see increased vibrancy and greater long-term economic resilience. I think perhaps most importantly, however, regional trails strengthen our sense of community and connections to one another. They create the places for people to connect with nature, with each other, and with our shared heritage. They expand transportation options and help support our statewide goals for safer and more accessible multimodal transportation. Bellingham is proud to be working in partnership with everyone in this room today, including the Nooksack Indian Tribe, with our partners at Whatcom County, with our partners at Lummi Nation, the Port of Bellingham, Skagit County, Semiahmoo First Nation, and many others to advance this project. Your collaboration and years of work is what makes progress today possible. And I appreciate each of you taking the time to learn, to continue to coordinate with one another, and to catalyze our regional trail connections. So thank you for dedicating your afternoon and for the energy that you're going to bring to the summit. And I wish you nothing but an inspiring afternoon. And now it is my honor to get to introduce George Swanisett Jr. of the Nooksack tribe. Please join me. Thank you, George.
So I Yolk Canum at the squeak Talisi Qua Nooksack. My name is Yolk Canum. That's my ancestral name. My given name is George Swanisett. And we're here to talk about our relationships and trails. Well, trails. We're no strangers to our trail system. And many of our roads here in Whatcom County are based off of our historical trails. Our trails are what tied us in from village to village. Nooksack's a historic tribe in this region. We're not on a reservation. We homesteaded our village sites, and from the mouth of the Nooksack all the way up to the mountains here, all the way up north, down south, as far as Skagit County. So that Nooksack River, it's one of our highways. My name Yolk Canum comes from a village called named Yuxoy, or no, from Squahalich. And Squahalich is in Linden. There was 5 houses on that village, and they housed at least 50 people per house. That village tied by a trail system up to another one up in the Lawrence area, which was called Yuxoy. That's where my paternal grandparents come from. Trails from there, they go out to Birch Bay. They go up to Samath. We had trails going California Creek. We have trails going right up the South Fork, up the Acme Valley and everything, going out to Skagit. We had 3 different dialects, 3 different languages. But, we talk about population growth and providing activities for our communities. And a lot of the time, when the tribes were invited to the table, it was always about us talking about our historic presence. And it was always to accommodate the population growth for the outside communities. But one of the things that we need to really express is our need for our population growth and our existence. When we sit at the tables and communicate with other agencies outside of the tribes, it's always to talk about how much more we can afford to give up and to accommodate everybody's population growth. But what's not really discussed is our need and our population growth. We're still here. We're alive and well. Our culture is alive. With all that being said, our relationships have become a lot stronger within this last decade with all the other agencies, and I owe that to the ones who are up in the front, coming to talk to the tribes. That's all we want, is to be able to be heard. A lot of the times I know it goes without being, we don't really say much because we're afraid of what we're going to lose again. And that's one of our biggest fears, is how little we have left and how much we have to protect it. So, we put together our teams of our I don't know what to call them other than our historians. They don't have the luxury of choosing whether or not they're going to be our historians. These tribal members of ours, it's just what they've been born with and what we carry. We're knowledge keepers, and who better to talk to than those knowledge keepers? Because we have the history, we have the knowledge of these lands, and those are the ones we need to bring forward to talk to our friends. But I think with these trail systems, there was a time where I wouldn't have accepted them, because I was taught by my elders. And like I said, today we have a good relationship, but back then it wasn't so good. So my leaders back then, they said, no, we don't want to talk about nothing like that. So I came into it at a young age doing the same thing. But as more time went on, 20, 30 years later, here we are. And we're starting to be able to be heard, and we're starting to be able to come together and see the good in everything. We can coexist. We're all part of the same community. We're all stewards of these lands. We all benefit from the good that's here. So, just like the trails connected our villages, like what the mayor said, it connects all of our people, and then it brings everybody together. There's a sense of, we call it squallow, and it's good feelings and ownership of these lands. It's one of the things that our people always talk about. Our DNA is in this earth as Nooksack people. After hundreds of thousands of years of, using the resources and putting them back, So when we talk about anything that's going to occur such as this, it's a good reason for us to be a part of it. And I wish I would have seen our neighbors, our other tribe, Lummi here, but Nooksack's here. We all speak for the same, I believe. So without anything, I would like to announce I have my vice chairman here from Nooksack, Anna Brewer, and just recognize her for being here. And I'd like to thank everybody for this opportunity to speak and let you know, Yethiokosai.
All right, so this is my way to introduce myself and ourselves as Recreation Northwest, if you're not familiar with the work we've done. I really just want to kind of go through our history really fast, so I hope you got your seatbelts on. Basically just demonstrating how we've filled in the gaps for our community and created programs, leveraged events, and just done great stuff over the years. So my daughter took this. I refer to this as me as the mossy-haired lunatic, quoting Tom Robbins. I am the founder and CEO, as I said earlier. Our mission is to teach the health benefits of nature, promote outdoor recreation, and steward the places where we play. The foundation was on the Bellingham Traverse, which I created in 2002 under the company Bellingham Benefits. It was a local fundraiser that really set the stage for us to launch Recreation Northwest in 2013. We were really based on events when we first launched, including the Olympia Traverse. Then we started program development, and I'm going to kind of talk out of sequential just to be able to set the stage for the work we've done and how this all leads to where we are today. We had two main events that we put on for many years. One was a statewide Washington Outdoor Recreation Summit. We would have the governor's policy advisor, John Snyder, come speak at that and drew people from all over the state. We also hosted a free public expo that was very popular. This was really based on a 2015 economic impact study that we did that was funded by Whatcom County Tourism, the city, Port of Bellingham, and the county. This is where we really set our stake in the ground to become the voice for outdoor recreation economy advocacy, and really where the foundation of our summit was to bring together people not just from Whatcom County, but around the state. And that led us to, with the urging of others in partnering in Oregon and just around the state and out of the governor's office, we launched the Washington Outdoor Business Alliance in 2019. And this is really a great reflection of how we viewed the outdoor recreation space. And you can see all the different segments of this sector and really the value and representation that they have and we have still across the community. You can all see yourselves somewhere in that ecosystem. How many people have heard of our Park Subscriptions program? Awesome. We launched it in 2015. We originally started working with healthcare providers, predominantly with Family Care Network. We had their doctors come on board and choose which park is right for you. We had a bunch of great materials in their doctor's offices. We had stickers in their windows, and really it took off for a couple years and then just kind of stagnated by 2019. The mapping tool that we had built, we integrated all of your data into it, and this was a resource for doctors to use. As we were going into 2019, really the gap that we saw was that there wasn't programming for using nature for mental health. And so we made the shift, and we'll come back to that later, when we started doing programming as an organization. Many of you hopefully are familiar with our stewardship in Fairhaven Park. This is really our first stewardship project that we took on in partnership with the city of Bellingham. We chose Fairhaven Park because of our impacts that we had been having through the Bellingham Traverse over the years. And as we launched a nonprofit, we looked at stewardship, and essentially, if you've heard me tell this story before, I sat down with Saul Weisberg, the founder of the North Cascades Institute, and I said, Saul, what's this stewardship all about? And he said, just pick a place and take care of it. And so we started being stewards of Fairhaven Park in 2015, and we're quickly propelled to build a trail and a wetland boardwalk. This was the problem that we were facing. It was just a big muddy mess getting into the woods. And so here's where we came in. It's all about time and money. And so we put in the time, we found the money, and leveraged volunteers to do work parties, leveraged funding from foundations, from sponsors, from local individuals to make this all happen. Who doesn't like a good ribbon cutting? And if you're curious about the little girls in the middle, the one in the middle is my daughter. Update for all of you, Violet's starting to get accepted into colleges as a senior in high school, and that's a pretty cool thing. So, there's Josh on the left. This is a picture of our wetland boardwalk that then provided access into the what is now the 100-acre wood. And then I didn't really know what I was getting into when we started doing this. This is a map of our mitigation site, and we were to care for this for the next 5 years. And so that was engaging work parties to have people come out and take care of those native plants that we had planted. With public support from Phillips 66 and seeing how our native plant gardens were being used, we transformed it into a public space, and with their first donation, we installed this public bench. And then we were on the tail end of COVID, coming out. We still had masks when we started working on this, but then we were all distancing. And these folks put in so much work that they cleared out a huge blackberry patch. And there they are. There's the whole crew sitting in there. It says P66 on the bench there, and you can see how we then evolved this to become more of a public space as part of an outdoor classroom, because this was really the aha moment for us. This was the merging of our stewardship work and our Parkscriptions program. And so for us, what that meant was, let's build an outdoor classroom. And so this was a little design comp that I had someone do for us to just get the sense of what we wanted to do with the space. And we worked with the city. Thank you, Nicole. Thank you, Lane, and other staff that were part of the master planning for the 100-acre wood. We were integrated into that, and that was really the foundation for us to build this outdoor classroom. We're good at making signs, because we'll talk about that later. Again, Phillips 66 came back, and we were able to raise the money, install interpretive signs in the native plant garden, not only of the native plants, but also of the invasive species that we all work so hard to get rid of. Another ribbon cutting with our former mayor and Nicole. And so then we started working on site design. One of my founding board members, Mike McCauley, you may know his name, being a port commissioner, he did all the site design for me for this. Once we got the hardscape going, we were still doing fundraising, so you can see here we are with our tent. This is actually my wetland biologist playing, and this is what the amphitheater looks like now. A little adventure rock trail. Really, this was an opportunity for me to show off my friend's work. And here we are with another ribbon cutting. And this was actually Mayor Kim Lund's first ribbon cutting, so I was honored to have her there for that. Now back to park descriptions. In 2023, Elizabeth, we started working with Options High School and started taking kids out into the outdoors for nature immersion, mindfulness practices. Over the last 3 school years, we've grown this program and topping out with hours outside. Oh yeah, I got this now. And numbers of students. This is a fun picture up on Samish Crest with a bunch of the kids. I'm sad to share this news. Some of you know, but we were actually sunsetting this program. We put a lot of time and effort into this in the last 3 years. We just had a hard time finding the funding, and so we were putting this program to bed. But the good news with that is now we have something else to focus on. And here's really how we got here. Ray and Carol Delacour came to me in 2021, and they said, why isn't there a bridge over the Arroyo Gap? And so we've been trying to answer that question for a while. And so in 2023, on my birthday, we submitted a letter to Nicole Oliver and the Parks Director saying that we would like to work with you as a community partner to complete the Coast Millennium Trail. We knew it was in Parks plans, and we got together with Gina Austin, and we presented to both the Greenways Advisory Committee and to the Whatcom Council of Governments, Hugh Conroy's here, to present where we are and where we'd like to see it go. And then that got me out into Whatcom County and starting to talk to county parks, talking to Bennett, and we were seeing a gap and a need for a local community advocacy group to help partner with our local jurisdictions to be a voice for trails for our community. And so thank you, Bennett, for giving us the green light to work with you in partnership with the city, and hopefully looking forward to working with all the rest of you. Our intent now is to work towards adopting the Coast Millennium Trail, but also another layer and lens. If I haven't met with you, if you haven't read some of the stuff that I've put out, I have a background in history and I just can't help myself. And as we looked around, really we have the opportunity to put another layer on top of this trail in creating a cultural heritage experience. And it's one of those things, there's so many plans on shelves. And so here's a couple of the plans that are currently, I think, sitting on shelves. This was one for the Bellingham Waterfront District for a heritage trail concept. Here's another cultural heritage trail plan that I know tourism is working on updating as we speak or next. So really looking forward to how can we integrate these plans that we have into this regional trail. There are some stickers here. I think, did you guys bring them, tourism? If you're not familiar with Maritime Heritage Washington, it's a national heritage area. Bellingham is a key part of that, and we really see a cool overlap in the Coast Trail. And with that, and Ken Wilcox will be speaking next on how the name was originally created and has evolved to our proposal to, in adopting the Coast Millennium Trail plans, to update the name to be the Salish Coast Trail. Next, I would like to introduce my old friend, Ken Wilcox. He's the author of both of our regional trail plans. You may recognize his face and his name from all the great hiking guidebooks that he's published over the last 20, 30 years. And so without further ado, I'd like to introduce Ken.
Thank you, Todd. So, a lot to talk about here, and I got 15 minutes. You're going to have to kick me when I get halfway through so I can switch gears to Beta Baker, because I could talk for 3 hours easily on each topic. So, yeah, just real quick, I came to Bellingham around the early 1980s, bought my house in 1983. I'm still there. And I was a kind of a hiking and climbing fanatic since, well, most of my adult life, but particularly starting around 1980 when I took a mountaineering class down in Everett, and I kind of became addicted to being out there in the mountains and up on all the trails. And I was out there, I didn't care what the weather was doing, I just had to be out there. And I also, at that time, I was working for the county as first a land use technician and then a shoreline planner. I was the Whatcom County shoreline planner for a couple of years in the late 80s, long time ago. I'm sure the rules have changed a little bit since then, but still have a basic idea of how it works. And then somebody in the office one day says, somebody come up and say, hey, what ideas do you have for a great hike? I got a cousin from Nebraska coming to town. We want to go somewhere on a beautiful trail. We see waterfalls and glaciers and bears and it's wildflowers and it's downhill both directions. And I'd give him, a tip on that. And one day somebody in the office said, you know all these trails, you should write a book. And I was like, write a book? I guess I could do that, So I went around to my favorite trails and put together a little scrappy, guidebook to trails around Whatcom County. And amazingly, it actually sold. And I ran out in a year and had to print more. And some credit for that goes to Village Books in Fairhaven because they were really strong supporters of local authors and that book in particular. So that it's still out there, which is great. Not enough to retire on, but it's a nice little supplement. So anyway, enough of that. I left the county in 1988 and began consulting, doing trail planning and design all over Western Washington. Even had one project down in Tierra del Fuego in South America, but mostly from Mason County to Island County and Whatcom and Skagit and all over Western Washington. I did a lot of bicycle planning. I was involved in the first bike plan for Whatcom County, Skagit County's plan, Island County plan, and so forth. So I kind of had this background, and I get a phone call one day from Trillium Corporation. They own a bunch of property up in Semiahmoo, and they had heard about this coastal bike route. It was in one of the plans. It was in one of the early county park and rec plans. And they said, hey, we think trails are great. We'd like to see something happen up here. How can we make this happen? And I said, well, you need a plan. Of course, first you got to figure it out. And they said, well, how much does that cost? And so I just threw out a number. It says, $25,000, you could probably get a good plan. And they said, okay, can you do it? Well, sure. So he said, okay, we're going to get everybody together. And their strategy was to try to get the city, the county, city parks, county parks, the port, and council governments, I believe, to all kick in $5,000 each. And they said, if you can't afford it, we'll pay for whatever the difference is. So I think we ended up with the city, the county, and the port, each kicking in the $5,000, and then Trillium picked up the rest. And we were off and running. And this was early 1999. And the buzz going around at that time was Millennium, the Y2K, the worry, well, getting ahead of myself. It's a big, milestone in life in America, I guess. And so everybody wanted to do something special for the millennium. There was actually a act of Congress that was going to recognize millennium trails and maybe open up some additional federal funding for trails. So it's like, yeah, we got to hitch onto that. Also, there was this worry that because most zippers say Y2K, that all the zippers are going to fail at the turn of the millennium. But mine didn't. Anyway, so when we're doing this plan, I'm thinking millennium, it's kind of a buzzword right now, but this is 1999, give it about 5 years, it's not going to mean anything, And so I thought, we should come up with a different name, but I was outvoted. I didn't want to push it because it's not my job to name the trail. And so everybody said, no, let's just go with Millennium, Coast Millennium. We don't want to argue about it. So that's what it ended up being. And then when I updated my hiking guide in 2003, I believe, I thought, I'm just going to plant a seed and put it out there, Salish Coast Trail, because it seemed like a no-brainer to me as a more appropriate name for the trail. And I never heard any real resistance to that, so that's kind of been floating out there, but it's not really official. It's still the Coast Millennium Trail, but if there's some movement toward calling it the Salish Coast Trail, it's fine with me, or if you want to call it the Pumpkin Pie Trail, I'm not married to it. Anyway, okay, I thought we were going to start with Coast Millennium, so do you want to switch that real quick? So Coast Millennium Trail, when we got the plan together in 2000, the basic, there we go. The basic idea was to have a multi-use trail from Skagit County to lower BC, essentially White Rock. And so we had actually had one meeting up in BC or at the border, I forget, with the mayor of White Rock and some other representatives to talk about this. We had interest from the Semiahmoo First Nation, which is great, and the Lummies, of course, down our way here. And let's see, we've got a list there of some of the main people that were involved in this, but there were actually a long list of people that participated in developing the plan, and I won't go through it all because it's a long list, but we had people from all the communities around the region and from state parks and so forth that were really interested in seeing this project happen. So we estimated that we'd be looking at about 75 miles of trail development. So even though it's only 25 miles north-south, from Skagit to BC, by the time you wiggle around, through the coastal areas and connect all the communities with little side paths and so forth, we're looking at about 75 miles of trails. Now, when I say trails, that included, I think, about 12 miles of road shoulders, where maybe there wasn't a better opportunity for something there, and a couple of miles of potential beach walks, like up by Point Whitehorn and Birch Bay. So it was, pretty ambitious. We estimated at the time we're looking at about $7 or $8 million to develop it. I'm sure we can double or triple that now to, just get something really basic. But a lot of it could be connected kind of with temporary routes. So especially for biking, you can bike the low traffic roads out in the county and get by with that. But we do need to see I think a signing effort made to connect all of those little routes and on-street and off-street corridors to get us as far as we can go. And we could just about do the whole thing that way if we take advantage of a few I guess I call low-hanging fruit, some improvements that we can make in the short term to connect those dots. Let's see, next. So there's a quick image of the routing that we came up with, and of course it was tentative, depending on what you could negotiate with some of the private property owners you had to deal with. And of course, we need to have the tribe and the First Nation, in the center of the discussion in their particular areas as well. Nothing on the left there. Okay, next. And this just shows a little bit more detail of some of the sites of interest along the corridor for the Bellingham to Skagit County line. Interestingly, after we finished the plan, Skagit County went on and designated a Coast Millennium Trail all the way to Snohomish County. So they were on board with this whole idea, and still are. I don't know that they're up to date on Salish Coast Trail or any of the work that's going on up here now, but they're definitely supportive of this idea. And eventually, who knows, Seattle and beyond, right? So next. So we got into this level of detail in the planning effort where we tried to at least anticipate the types of facilities that might be appropriate in the various areas. So this is obviously up around Semiahmoo, north end of Birch Bay, up into Drayton Harbor. And this is a combination of existing off-street paths, separated paths, some road shoulders, bike lanes, and streets, just shared roadways. And I think that was all I had for Coast Millennium. Just a couple other quick notes I wanted to make. We identified on-street shared roadways of about 35 miles worth that we could actually use now, that we could sign. Or I say now, in 2000, maybe it's still feasible, and that we could eventually replace some of those with bike lanes or off-street facilities. So So you think about that, 35 miles, that's half of our 70, just about 75. So there's potential to do the signing, I think, to get people through, especially cyclists. We came up with a phasing plan, and of course we're way beyond what our ambitious hopes were back then. And then we also prepared a preliminary design report, which provided even a little more detail and some schematics of trail cross sections and bridges and trailheads, just to jumpstart the permitting and environmental review and funding aspects of the project. Yeah, that's enough on Coast Millennium. Should we switch gears to Bay to Baker? To the left there, that's the brochure that the folks put together through the Bay to Baker Coalition. I should give a shout out to Jay Tabor. Richard, I don't know if you know Jay up in Blaine, but he was very involved at the very start of getting people energized around the idea of a trail from Bellingham up to Mount Baker. And as far as I know, he coined the name Bay to Baker Trail. Formed a little coalition of local trail advocates, and actually applied for a grant, got a small grant from the Bullitt Foundation to help further some of that early work. And he was particularly inspired by the coming legislation called ICE-T, the Intermodal Surface Transportation Efficiency Act of 1991, and that was a major redo of how federal transportation money was going to be distributed around the country. And it opened up a lot of avenues for trails as part of this multi-modal concept. And so trails, these regional trails, could suddenly tap into some of these federal dollars. And he was like really into that. And he was lobbying the county council, like, get ready, you need to get your grants in for this, and making sure that Bay to Baker was right in the middle of it. And remember, this is happening in the early 90s, so we're about 10 years ahead of the Coast Millennium Trail at this point. So this was really the number one priority at that time. And he definitely got some buy-in from the right people. And the route itself, 74 miles, non-motorized, of course, connects the communities, included this idea that if the railroad line from Linden to Everson and Sumas was ever abandoned, that would be an ideal trail corridor, as Marlin and others are well aware and working hard to try to make that happen. But that would be a wonderful way to connect Linden into this trail system. Everson got busy and developed about a mile of trail out there. One of the things we pushed on early was trying to get the Washington Department of Transportation to include trail space on the bridges. So when they were building new bridges over the river and some of the creeks, that they'd provide enough room for a future trail. So you've probably noticed, you go out by Boulder Creek, big wide bridge, Nugent's Corner, the bridge over the river there, big wide space on either side, or one side at least. There's several more where they put these big wide bridges in, anticipating that we're going to have trails going through there. And unfortunately, we haven't got our trails put in, so those bridges are just sitting there. A lot of money was spent to build those and to widen the facilities for trails. So we got to get busy and connect them to our trail system. Let's see, and when I say 50% of the route on public land, a lot of that is national forest. So this concept goes all the way, let's see, why don't you go ahead and advance one. So from Bellingham all the way up to Shuckson Arm is what we were thinking, up by the ski area, kind of right above the ski area. If you've hiked up or skied up to Pandome, a little beyond that, the ridge kind of goes out toward Mount Shuckson. And there's a beautiful high point out there that would be a wonderful terminus that's not deep into wilderness. It's still kind of on the perimeter of the ski area, so I don't think it would be highly disruptive to the natural environment there and the wilderness values that we have up in that region. So it seemed like it might be a good terminus and it would have spectacular views of Mount Baker. And we had a lot of interest and support with the Forest Service itself and some of the upriver communities. We got another grant and some county funding to get a little further ahead on our planning for the project. And how are we doing at time? and so we were able to, what was I going to say? Shoot, lost my train of thought there. Anyway, we decided we'd focus on the Boulder Creek to Glacier section. And the county owned much of the old railroad right-of-way that went through there. And maybe you've been up on the section from Maple Falls over to Boulder Creek. Is that pretty hikeable right now? Okay, yeah. It's had some issues, but you know, it's low-hanging fruit. It won't take much to get that back in place. There were some issues getting all the way to Glacier, though, because the river has an attitude, and it took out some of that old railroad grade. However, we went up there and talked to one of the property owners that I know, and he had some great ideas of how we could get around that. And he was saying, you know, I'll even help build the thing. You know, he was like totally supportive of the idea of this trail. So we had gotten along on the contract to actually develop construction documents to put out to bid to do the stuff that was feasible now. The washout was going to be a bit of a problem, and there was a bridge that still needed to be sorted out, but we could at least make some headway on a lot of the rest of it. And part of that process involved having a public meeting out in Glacier. And so we had a meeting out there in June of 1992, I think. And we had a lot of support, a lot of public support, and then we had the naysayers. So we had people that said, no, we don't need a trail here. People are going to dump their refrigerators and their couches. They're going to smoke pot. They're going to steal our stuff. And, you know, that kind of reaction that you get when really the more common reality is that when you formalize a place like that, you know, and you bring people in, and it doesn't have to be crowds, but you bring in regular use, it becomes kind of a self-enforcing sort of process, as many of you are probably aware. And so the idea wasn't to spoil the community in some bizarre way, but to actually enhance things and make it good for everyone. And so a lot of people understood that, and we're all for it, but we did have this resistance. And people got kind of agitated and, you know, passed around petitions and so forth. And so the county council, there was a change in the county council, and the politics sort of changed, and they kind of backed away from the project for a while. Didn't want to stir up more trouble. And so the idea of getting construction going on that section just kind of fell by the wayside. It was not going to happen for a while. Volunteers went in and did some work anyway, and the county did some work at the trailhead there. So there is, you know, a substantial chunk of trail there, but there's opportunity to do a whole lot more, I think, in the short term. So I kind of consider that, except for the washout, most of that I think is low-hanging fruit. I think we should go for it. We identified some other issues and concerns. There's a... Okay, all right. I think that's about all I wanted to cover. So anyway, there's lots of opportunity. And I know the city has done tremendous work, you know, getting the beginning of the thing. Oh, advance the next slide. Yeah, so we were looking at this pier way back then thinking, wouldn't it be nice if that could become the terminus of the Bay to Baker Trail? And it's awesome that it's finally coming together. So,
Thank you, Ken. That was looking back. Now we're going to bring up Lane from City of Bellingham, and she and Ben are going to talk back to back about the Bay to Baker. And then we're going to have a break, and then we'll come back and talk about the Coast Millennium Trail. There you go.
Thank you. That was a perfect segue. I'm going to be focusing on the Bay to Baker Trail first. You can go ahead and skip. Thanks, Elizabeth. So I'm going to focus primarily on Bay to Baker first, then we'll take a break and talk about the Coast Millennium Trail. And I'm going to be focusing primarily just on the section that the City of Bellingham is working on, has worked on, is in our planning phases, or is working on in the future within generally the city limits of the City of Bellingham. So just a quick overview of the City of Bellingham Parks and Recreation, how we do some of our trail planning. We look to our Parks, Recreation, and Open Space Plan, which I'm sure many of you are familiar or have your own. We're actually in the middle of updating our Parks, Recreation, and Open Space Plan right now, so this timing of this meeting is great, so we can get some input from our regional partners as we work towards formalizing that plan in the start of 2026. Underneath our Parks, Recreation, and Open Space Plan, and consistent with our PROS plan, we also have our Greenways Strategic Plan, which really looks to guide the funding of our Greenways levy that's collected, and it is consistent with the PROS plan, and also has some mapped priorities that you'll see that include the Whatcom Creek corridor and the Bay to Baker. I guess I can do it, Elizabeth. Is that what this is? Yeah, I can handle it. Thank you. So within our PROS plan, this is what our recommended trails mapping looks like. So we have our recommendations within the PROS plan for things like parks, open space, programming, where we want to do conservation of our existing resources and amenities, and where we want to expand and grow as population grows. And so we look to this at our level of service, equity, geographic distribution of all of our trails, look for gaps, and whether those are small neighborhood connectors or more regional multimodal trails that are encouraging people to do mode shift as they go from destinations of places of employment or entertainment, parks, building those trail connections, and then also providing smaller neighborhood connectors. So you'll see on the right, I've just overlaid the Bay to Baker and Coast Millennium Trail over some of our recommended trails. So you can see that we have about those orange lines make up about 280 different segments throughout the city that we have in our plans for trails. And so those 280 segments, many of those combine to form the recommendations of where the Bay to Baker and Coast Millennium Trail will go through the city. So looking at our update of the PROS plan, we are working to really strengthen and emphasize our regional trail partnerships this time around with the update. So making sure that we're consistent with the new county's PROS plan, making sure that we are consistent and aligned on those regional trail connections, looking at loop trails, also thinking about these regional trails as destination trails, bringing visitors to the area to enjoy these regional arterial trail networks. So making sure that our trails are lining up. We've also worked a lot with our city's transportation group. We have Dylan and Tim here to make sure that our trails are lining up with those green-gray connections, so that where trails meet on-street connections, we have bike facilities, pedestrian facilities, to make sure that we have seamless connections for the community. So looking closely at the Bay to Baker Trail, this is a section of the completed part through the city. The city has built about 1.5 miles of the Bay to Baker Trail. We typically refer to it as the Whatcom Creek Trail as it goes through the city. It's in the Whatcom Creek floodway, the largest floodplain in the city. So I'm just going to go over a little bit of the history of what we've built in the city, what we're working on right now project-wise, and then what we have coming up in the next couple years of our budget and work plan. So here's the Bay to Baker or Whatcom Creek Trail as it goes through the city. You can see the red solid line is what's been built. The dashed are to the west is things that are either in design or planning right now, and then further east is future phases of work from the city. So just a quick history. Many of you know this is a former railway. So this is the pre-developed conditions before the trail was built, looking east along the railway corridor. Seemingly seems like a simple trail connection to make along the railway, but turns out that's not quite the case. I'll get into that in just a little bit. But just a reminder, that Greenway strategic plan that I mentioned, this is just a snapshot showing Some of the mapped priorities for greenwise spending, I think Nicole mentioned earlier, we've been able, maybe it was the mayor, we've been able to build and maintain a lot of these trail corridors through the incredible thought of the Greenwise Levy. We just passed our Greenwise Levy 5, and we're fortunate to have that funding to be able to develop and maintain and steward these trails. You can also see that we're able to purchase properties with Greenwise funding. So over here on the right, you're seeing a map of some of the properties that have been purchased, and those turquoise and purple there along the eastern area of the Bay to Baker, where some properties built or purchased within the last couple years they're not necessarily right on the route of Bay to Baker, but they'll provide parks nearby and then neighborhood connections to get folks to the Bay to Baker so that people can use that main east-west arterial to commute or recreate or access other areas of the city. There's also some property right there on Sunset and Hannigan that we purchased that we'll hopefully be able to figure out a safe north-south connection off of Sunset to get down to the Bay to Baker in the future. So another snapshot of kind of zoomed in a little bit closer. This is our current planning area for the Bay to Baker. This is where we're really actively working to get the trail from the pier all the way. It's pretty much kind of to the end of Iron Gate right now is our current planning area. So you're seeing the existing trail, a future phase in the dashed lines, and then in the orange is a project that's under construction right now. So look back on that 1.5 miles that I mentioned that had been built. And just a note, I think that red should be new trail. It's not a road. So just wanted to highlight, I feel like this area would be remiss if I didn't also mention all the environmental projects and other projects from the city that have been done here. We have that seemingly simple railroad corridor that I showed, but it's not quite that simple. We have a new arterial street that goes through here. We have some bridge replacements that happened there along James Street, new culverts, fish passage projects, entire reroute of the creek to reestablish the floodplain and get the water out of Sunset Pond. So building the trail really had to take into account all of those other projects within the area. What's been really cool to see is how heavily used the trail is since it's been built. So this is just some heat map data. You can see that, you know, the brighter the line, the more heavily used it is. So that section that was built, the 1.5 miles, you're seeing how well that's used. As I mentioned, this is the watershed, so it's a really large floodplain through the city. So those 4 phases of the creek reroute were done in conjunction with the trail. This is a snapshot of the creek reroute showing how the trail aligned with the creek reroute, and you can see that new red dashed line is what's under construction right now. If any of you have been out there lately, it's a massive project. There's a new bridge going in, all kinds of boardwalks. So it'll be a wonderful accessible route from the end of Racine Street to get down to Sunset Pond and loop all the way around, an accessible route all the way around Sunset Pond. It'll be a great way to connect all the folks in the Barclay neighborhood to the Bay to Baker Trail, as well as King Mountain neighborhoods, Iron Gate, Meridian neighborhoods south to get to the Bay to Baker Trail as well. So just looking at the Bay to Baker, you can see the incredible connectivity there from Sunset Pond, where that red dashed project is, getting down to Cornwall Park and then Squalicum Creek Park and all the way to the pier that you saw at the end of the last presentation. So highlighting that 2016 project, this is just a snapshot of that bridge going in at the creek. And I wanted to just highlight that in addition to, you know, building the trail for folks to recreate and commute and enjoy this space, we also have an incredible amount of stewardship and enhancement of the environment that happens in terms of planting, monitoring those plant long-term maintenance obligations to make sure that this area is well stewarded. And so we're looking at providing these really great recreation and transportation amenities, but also being good stewards of this creek corridor. Just a snapshot of the creek reroute once it was complete. So as I mentioned, you know, not such a simple railroad grade to build. It was about about 3 years to get all the permits. We basically took into account the creek reroute, the road, all the other projects along the way, and had to count those as pre-existing conditions and make sure that our mitigation sequencing lined up with the other projects. So another pre-developed condition, and then I'll just quickly go through some construction photos. We'll get to the finished trail, and I did mention the habitat improvements. We get a lot of requests and feedback for more educational and interpretive signage. People really want to connect with these special places through the city that they have access to. So here's some of the finished photos. You can see some of the big culverts and bridges over side channels and main channels here. So just highlighting again this Sunset Pond project that we're working on. It's going to be a wonderful amenity for the community. We'll have the interpretive and educational signages that I mentioned, the signage that I mentioned. There's going to be new boardwalks. And then this will basically terminate at the end of Iron Gate, and then we'll start looking at future planning to the east of Iron Gate, continuing towards Hannigan, and then out past the former DNR parcels that were purchased last year with the Greenways funds. This is the current existing conditions at Sunset Pond. It's a really lovely place to walk around if you haven't been out there yet. So I'm going to jump to what we're currently working on. So right now in our work plan, we're looking at the Whatcom Creek Trail West segment. So that is basically the section where we've left off right at Cornwall Memorial Park at Meridian Street all the way down to Roeder. So looking at that former railroad corridor, our current design looks at using some of the Whatcom Parkway right-of-way, some of the former railroad right-of-way. So we're really doing a deep dive on what kinds of property rights would need to be established to make this happen, looking at doing a full design so that we can coordinate with the 5 or 6 other city projects that are happening. Lots of environmental projects. We're removing the Baker Creek trestle, doing some fish passage improvements at West Street, doing the Roeder Bridge, all kinds of stuff happening in this corridor. So making sure that we're coordinating with all those projects. So this is a snapshot of some feasibility and data gap analysis work that was completed earlier. They broke this section from Meridian down to Roeder into 7 different segments and looked at our opportunities and constraints along the way. We identified what kind of property would be needed to make this connection, what kind of projects were in each of these sections, and then got a good idea of what it would take to actually design this trail. So we've now, in our work plan and budget, got the actual design. This is just, again, another snapshot of one of those study areas just to give a sense of how complex this area is. And you'll see on the next slide, one of the most exciting projects happening. I don't know, if you like transportation, it's exciting. This is the Birchwood and Meridian Transportation Improvement Projects. This will be the new roundabout combining Birchwood and Whatcom Parkway. But you'll see this is really going to be a nice start of that section from Meridian. You're seeing Cornwall Memorial Park down at the southeast corner. So the Bader Baker will go through this roundabout and then start to continue on the rest of the way that the Parks Department is working on designing right now. And then another big exciting project that's still just in the planning and feasibility phase, working with adjacent landowners, having conversations about how we could make this happen. The plan set north is to your left here, so we're headed the top of the page would be heading east. So looking at that connection from where Sunset Pond at the bottom of the page would leave off, and then how can we continue across Hannigan and start to go east. So coordinating the future Beta Baker with the next phase of the creek reroute that I believe is affectionately called Wandering Wood. So just in the feasibility phase right now, but making sure that we're coordinating with other departments that are doing some great environmental work. With that, I'm going to leave off, and I think we're taking a break before we talk about Coast Millennium, or is Bennett jumping in? All right. All right.
Great, appreciate it. All right, so I'm Bennett Knox, Parks Director for Whatcom County. I've been with the county for 3 years. I want to first thank Todd, thank Nicole for setting this up. I'm 3 years in, and I'm really excited about this. We've been, I'm coming from Louisville, Kentucky. I had involvement with some multi-modal trail projects there. was natural resource manager, ran a nonprofit, did environmental programming in underserved parts of Louisville. So I really appreciate the collaborative nature of what it's going to take to do this project, and I really want to honor that we've got a lot of partners in the room, both for Coast Millennium and for Bay to Baker. And so a theme for me is how do we do this work, and it's really going to be the collaboration between us and the folks in the room. We're starting a journey, and so I just want to honor that. I want to also really appreciate Anna Brewer and George Swansett for coming. They're a key part of this in terms of, and George mentioned it, who's at the table, what are we considering, and all these things being considered early, how this impacts all the folks, whether they're a stakeholder or a partner. And so I just really want to honor that work and what it's going to take and the recognition that it is going to take collaboration. I'm joined by Rod Lamb and Chris Thompson, our operation manager and our design development manager. So we are putting together a team to embark on this. I think are acknowledging that Ken mentioned there's a history here, 30 years for both, roughly, and county progress has been slow, and we've had a gap really of activity from our department. So working to address that. I wanted to give an update really on what we're doing. So I mentioned Rod's our design and development manager. We've been trying to put together the actual full-time capacity to do this work. I actually have the person in the room who hired me. This was a passion for me when I was hired that we're going to embark on this work. And we don't have the benefit of a levy like the city of Bellingham. One of the things we do have is a position that's been created. I thought I was going to be standing up here today announcing that we had a senior planner for multi-modal trails hired starting Monday. 2 days ago, we found out that the candidate backed out. I think maybe moved to the Netherlands, I'm understanding, so we'll give a pass on that. We are in the process of an offer to another candidate, and so hopefully I'll have some news on that. So we're putting together the capacity. The challenge for us, and again, it was Tyler Schroeder with the port who hired me when he was a deputy executive. We have to show progress. There's some funding for this. We have a partnership with Public Works. That portion of the road fund, it's paths and trails, is dedicated to this work. So we appreciate that partnership with Public Works. Our funding for the position is a REIT, so it's a real estate excise tax. We're going to need to show progress because there are a lot of pressures on that funding. So just reiterating, I'm excited to work with you all in a collaborative way and support your applications. I hope we'll get the same, and then we'll tell the story that will bring about success. So that's my introduction. So we are renewing our focus on this project. So I'm going to start with Bay to Baker and kind of give you an update. Ken mentioned what has been done in the past. I think the current status is we have a partially constructed trail, and I think trail is the apt word. It's in a path in some ways. It's got some sections that are paved, but others it's really a footpath that's overgrown and it's not connected. We did have a washout, so there's some property acquisition that needs to be done. We need to determine our standards, and we do envision this to be where it's possible, a paved, multi-use, ADA accessible path. And so, I'm going to make sure I can click this. Yes. So I think this was shown actually in Lane's presentation, but the comp plan for the county does outline conceptual routes for Bay to Baker and Coast Millennium. I'm not showing that because I think we really recognize we need to identify those routes by working with the stakeholders and partners, and so there's some room to get that right. What we do have in place is we were successful on a grant through the Sandy Williams Connecting Community Connections program through WashDOT. We have $425,000. We don't have the grant agreement in place just yet, but we look to have that by March. We have some partners in the room that are on that grant, so Recreation Northwest for sure. We got Sonia, Max as well. And so, that grant has a pretty significant community engagement component. That's designed that way, so we look forward to working with those in the room. So we've got representatives from Columbia Valley. I see we've obviously got folks from the Tourism Bureau. Land Trust owns property in the area. I think PSE's here. WashDOT certainly. So we are going to be looking to really engage with the community as a first step to get the routing right, and other project and connect with other projects in the vicinity. So there's the Kendall Trail which is part of Bay to Baker, the potential route that goes up through Everson. And I'm remiss to mention that in the comprehensive plan that's going before council right now, there is an alternate route for Bay to Baker proposed to go along SR 542 the full way, so that there are kind of two routes that are at least in the comp plan for Bay to Baker. So our project's the Sandy Williams grant. It will connect at the end of the Kendall Trail in Kendall and go to Glacier, ideally even beyond to the Forest Service to connect to the trail systems that they have. We are coordinating with WashDOT on a number of their culvert replacement projects, which, as Ken mentioned, those are designed. Some of those are bridges, which will have accommodations for the trail in the future. We did recently receive funding for an upgrade to the Glacier restroom. So highlighting here, the potential for this trail in terms of tourism impact. And so related to that, we have tourism visit Bellingham here today. So we are really trying to be intentional about how we tell the story of what's the benefit of the Bay to Baker Trail. So it's health and wellness, as Mayor Lund kind of suggested, health and wellness, community cohesion, community connectivity, alternative transportation, economic development tourism. We want to tell the complete story. In order to do that, we need to work with you all in the room to do that. That's how we're going to be successful. So I wanted, from my perspective, again, we're trying to make sure we can implement this. We don't want the planning that we do for Bay to Baker to sit on a shelf. So everything should be geared toward implementation. I think some other speakers have kind of teed up. We want to learn from the lessons of the past where maybe this project stalled. And so, I think some of that, I think these are open questions to the group as we move forward, that we make sure we consider these. So I heard, there was community opposition. So we have to ask ourselves, did we do the best job of engaging the community in terms of what their desires and needs are? So we want to make sure we do that. Tribal engagement early, I think we'll talk about Coast Millennium and what that means for interpreting the history and acknowledging, how this trail can benefit the future of our communities, including tribes. So that's so important that we want to have those conversations early and understand what we're trying to accomplish. So what are the outcomes? Who do we intend to benefit? And have everyone at the table so we can get this right and not stall. How do we advance the work? I think I've kind of shared from the county's perspective, since we don't have a levy. We are in the process right now of with this effort and the grant for Bay to Baker of kind of establishing what our specific objectives are that we're going to be putting into our CPROS plan. So this is kind of a pre-phase for us as we move to 27 and 28 and update our comprehensive park rec open space plan so that it can really identify the actionable steps that we need to take and identify the funding needs. And so that may open up some opportunities for us if we do that to other funding models for this. So we want to keep that conversation going as well. Okay, so I think that's about 15 minutes. So I appreciate it. I'm really excited to take a break here, and I hope everyone's going to come to the after party. So I know a lot of you in the room, haven't met some of you, so I look forward to connecting.
Thanks, Ben. Ken has one thing he asked.
Just real quick, I didn't mean to leave an impression that the folks out in the Glacier community are opposed to the trail. There was some conflict, but people came around, and Roger Despain, the park director at that time, put a lot of effort into working with folks out there and resolved a number of the issues. So I think there's a very positive feeling out there, I think, for the county coming in and working with the community to make something happen. So I didn't want to leave it in a negative there.
Thank you. So as I teased earlier, I'm going to now talk about the Coast Millennium Trail, or Salish Coast Trail. I think I've used these interchangeably throughout this presentation. So referring to the CMT or Salish Coast Trail. And again, I'm just going to focus on this inset here, the Bellingham detail. So looking at the overall Coast Millennium Trail, I'm just going to highlight more or less, again, within the city limits of Bellingham and what the city is completed to date, what we're currently working on, and then what's to come in the future on projects for this area. So I'm not going to go back to the pros plan, but like I mentioned, there's the 280 segments in our pros plan. Some of those segments fall within this larger Coast Millennium Trail regional trail corridor. So looking at breaking it up and identifying projects that get prioritized and into our work plans and our annual capital budgets. So here's just a look at some of the trail segments that have been completed to date through the city of Bellingham. And so some of these trails kind of have their own names for the different sections that make up the larger Coast Millennium Trail. So starting down on the south side, coming off of Arroyo Park, we have the interurban trail that goes around the 100-acre wood in Fairhaven Park and runs right near some of the projects and exciting stuff that Todd was talking about that happened in the 100-acre wood. Going through Fairhaven and then starting to pick back up again at Taylor Dock over the Paddle Point Trestle into Boulevard Park, and then starting the South Bay Trail that gets all the way to downtown. There's the water route and then the upland route that was mentioned earlier. So the blue is more of the water route. The orange is this upland through town route. So looking at the Waypoint Laurel Central Pier, the bike track there and the separated pathways through Central Pier and then continuing on the water. And then the upland route, we have completed the Old Village Trail that gets you all the way to Elizabeth Park. And then they meet back up once again and head up. So those are the sections that have been completed through the city in terms of the actual trail connections. And then like I mentioned earlier in my last presentation, we've been coordinating with the transportation division to make sure that where those trail connections come out and there's going to be some on-street connections, we're closely coordinating with the bike and pedestrian master plans throughout the city so that there's seamless, safe, identifiable routes to continue on the Coast Millennium Trail. So I'm going to talk a little bit about gaps in the Coast Millennium Trail and primarily focus on these gaps and look at our current work and what's in the future to come. So the three kind of gaps we've identified throughout the city, one of which Todd talked about earlier, starting from the south. That number 3 is the Arroyo Park Gap. It's that big dip topographically where it crosses Old Samish Road. And then the continuation of the overwater walkway connecting Boulevard Park to the new Salish Landing Park. And a quick announcement about Salish Landing Park. The cleanup is just about to start, and construction of the new 17-acre waterfront park there will be happening over the next 2 to 3 years. So really exciting work happening there. So looking at connecting a water route to connect Boulevard Park to Salish Landing. And then up north, another gap that I'm going to focus on in this presentation is what we call the Lockwood property. It was a property purchased about almost 20 years ago with Greenways funds to look at a safe bypass route up where the road, Marine Drive, crosses over the railroad. So looking at this Arroyo Park Gap, there was previously a big high bridge there that spanned Old Samish Road. This is what it looked like. It was ultimately abandoned. However, the abutments still remain. So if you've been to Arroyo Park or the end of Interurban, you may have seen these big abutments that remain. You can see there the red arrows that point to the abutments that are still in place. And so there was a lot of work done around kind of 2002, 2003 to look at this area, look at some feasibility of a high bridge option, reestablishing that big high bridge connection, or perhaps a mid-bridge or lower boardwalk style trail that paralleled Chuckanut Drive to connect folks from the end of the interurban and kind of bypass going through that Chuckanut Creek Arroyo Park dip. So this is just a snapshot of the planning area. You can see that red arrow there pointing to the Arroyo Park bypass. Then just showing some images from that work that was done previously, some feasibility and design work to look at different segments of how to make that connection accessible and safe for users. And then before we get into what we're working on now, I just wanted to give a shout out to Ray and Carol Deliker for really bringing this back, and also Gina Austin, who's our Parks Project engineer, has been a big champion for this as well. And I know she would love to be here, but she's on vacation today, and she helped put together a lot of this. So thank you to the Delikers for really championing this and making sure that we're working on things that are in our plan, so thank you. So this is just back to that old planning effort that was done previously. One of the options, you saw the big high bridge with the abutments. This is that more low bridge that would parallel along Chuckanut Drive. So you can see kind of overall on the aerial and topo the low bridge and the high bridge options. There's the North Chuckanut Mountain Trailhead to orient yourself there. There's a little quick schematic that was done showing the high bridge, and it's I think that midpoint is 110 feet above the creek, so it is a high bridge. And I think our current, I want to say we were looking at ballpark cost estimates, and we were somewhere around 20 million for this high bridge option. So before I jump ahead to Marine Drive, I just wanted to mention, so this is just in the concept planning stages. So next steps for this gap here on the south end would be to work with our community partners, understand community priorities and needs for this area, have a public process, and then work towards getting some actual design, feasibility, permitting, construction, all of that into our work plan and budget if things progress and we're able to secure the large amount of funding that would be needed to make this project happen. I'm going to jump all the way up to the north side to talk about the Marine Drive bypass. So coming out of the city, you'll see little Whatcom Park there down at the south at the bottom of your screen. That's where the brand new pier that just opened that you saw earlier is. And so heading up Marine Drive, we've been coordinating really closely with the county that's doing their Marine Drive bike and pedestrian improvements. So looking at coordinating a project on city-owned property right there where phase 2 of the Marine Drive improvements will terminate, right at the driveway that enters into city-owned property. As I mentioned, that was bought in 2008 with Greenways levy funds for future parkland as the population grows to this side of town, or in the interim, just for a safe trail bypass to get around that railroad crossing that has some sight distance issues. And so here is an aerial of what that property looks like. As I mentioned, you can faintly kind of see on the south end of the property the existing driveway that went in. So there's some existing grades that would work to have a trail route go through there, and then ultimately get people out to Wynn Road, and then they can continue back on Marine Drive or continue east or north if they chose. And I'm gonna steal the port's thunder just a little bit here with my next image. I'm sorry, Kurt, if you're out there. He was here earlier. Oh, there you are. So this was work that was done by the port. And so the city's property is on the far left edge of your screen there. Basically, it's points, I think, 9, 10, and 11. Oh. Right there is the city property. So this was work done by the port. This was some preliminary concept alignments of a trail here. I think it was about 3 or 4 years ago at this point, looking at some of the critical areas on site of the city property, port property, county property, lining up all 3 of our properties and where they meet, looking at road improvements on Marine Drive, possible trail routes through here. And so we have a really nice conceptual alignment. As you can see, it's a pretty heavily encumbered property, so lots of wetlands, mitigation, permitting. So this project is part of our current work plan. We actually have our project manager, Paul Knippel, is here today. He's working on this starting next year. This will be in our budget, and we're just going to slowly start working on this so that as the county finishes phase 2 of the Marine Drive improvements, hopefully we're just starting to be constructing our part so that right where those bike and pedestrian facilities end is a seamless transition into city property to make a safe bypass there. I think that's all I have. So I'm going to turn it back over to Bennett.
I'm sorry, I do not have a map. My intent here was more to be conversational because I'm hoping we have a subsequent meeting where we can look at maps in detail. So I wanted to, from our perspective on the county, and again, I want to acknowledge the folks who are in the room from other jurisdictions as we talk about how to connect Coast Millennium to Blaine and now I understand to Canada. There are various opportunities where this route could go. City of Linden, obvious one. Potential Lummi Nation, another one. There's WDF property. There's obviously private property. I think we've got some private landowners here in the room. So while there are segments that have been built, so I want to go through those at least what's in the county segment. So interurban trail south of Bellingham, which was on the map that Lane showed. She's mentioned Marine Drive Phase 1. That is complete. Public Works is working on Marine Drive Phase 2. I understand that's maybe 27 construction to the Lockwood property. So then from the Lockwood property, that's where do we go from there? So there's the potential a route by the airport. There's potential to go down Marine Drive. There's potential to there is Lummi property in that area, so connections possibly to the casino or commercial developments that they have. I know they're not in the room, not speaking for them in any way, but those are some of the opportunities. Certainly from a connectivity standpoint, possibly going west to connect to the trail that Lummi has that Public Works for the county constructed some years ago that connects their tribal area to the casino to the north. So all potential routes, and then as you get further, acknowledging the work the Blaine Birch Bay Park and Rec District is doing to find a route around Drayton Harbor through California Creek. That's a potential project that could come through the berm, the Birch Bay berm in Birch Bay as a segment. So there are a number of potential routes. I think what we're trying to do right now is set up a process where we can explore what those are when we get our planner on board. So want to go through one of the projects that we had, which really for us was instructive, that brought together partners, and that is the one at the bottom there. It was the USDOT Reconnecting Communities grant. We did not receive that, but that was our first opportunity as the Parks Department to embark on planning for the area from the Lockwood property north past the bridge that's the barrier, and try to find some routing working with partners in that area. We did not get that grant, but we actually were considered, or we made it to the second round. But from that process, we had letters of support from a number of you all in the room, and we look forward to the feedback we got was, for that particular grant, there was we just didn't get the technical score. Part of that is our newness at the process as a department, so I'll have to fess up to that. But it was certainly encouraging that if we can work together to tell the story of this particular project, there was equity component, there was economic development component, certainly climate impact component, which may not be a federal criteria moving forward, but certainly for that one it was. So working together to tell a compelling story is how we believe we're going to be successful. That's the message we received partially from that grant. The other opportunity was with WashDOT. They had a active transportation grant that was, if we'd been successful, it would have set us up for design work and then construction planning, construction funding. We were not able to move forward that precisely because we didn't have the planning in place. So from our perspective, we are looking for partnerships with those of you in the room to put ourselves in position for the next phase of planning. Maybe that's through WashDOT, we hope, but certainly we'll be on the lookout for other opportunities. Even if we don't have funding, it doesn't stop us from working with you all to identify routes when we have our planner on board. So that is what we will look to follow up with you all as a next step. So that was kind of my segue using that grant into kind of what are our opportunities. I mean, I think I've said it many times, it's coming together to develop a shared vision for the benefits of this routing from the Coast Millennium. I think Todd has laid out, there's elements to this of interpretation that ties into the scenic and historical nature of the maritime resources in this community. That's critically important. We have jurisdictions that would benefit from connectivity from an economic development standpoint, alternate transportation standpoint. The Port of Bellingham, they're in charge of economic development for the community, have consistently pointed to trail development as an important part of the tourism economy in the community. We have needs for tribal community in terms of connectivity to jobs, schools, the recreation component, the health and wellness component. We have a compelling story to tell for the Coast Millennium, just like we do for Bay to Baker. So we need to come together. We need to put that to paper so we can all draw on that for our applications, whether it be City of Ferndale, City of Linden, certainly County, Blaine, Birch Bay Park and Rec District. So that's what I hope to get out of this meeting, and I want to put that forth. In terms of, again, it's just how do we make this work happen? Those are kind of the questions that I've raised, and I do believe the collaboration and putting things to paper in terms of a vision is what's going to win the day. Key lessons, kind of reiterating the questions. I think we've as far as Coast Millennium, obviously the lessons that we've learned is, again, there are needs of each of the different partners. So WDFW, for instance, there is a trail that goes along the Nooksack. Is that a route? We need to explore that with each stakeholder, what these routes are and what their concerns are early on in the process. So that's something we look to do. I've kind of touched on it in terms of the outcomes and the beneficiaries, just, again, the notion that we need to engage with all partners, particularly the tribes. And as it relates to Lummi, they have a community plan. Dusting that off and making sure we're supportive of that is important. As terms of advancing the work, I hope to work with each of you all, and we once we get our planner on board, look for follow-up conversation, community outreach from us as we try to work together. So, thank you.
Thanks, Bennett. Next up, Bellingham Whatcom County Tourism, aka Visit Bellingham.
Thank you so much, Todd. Good afternoon again, everyone. Both Lindsay and I are going to provide some details on this presentation. And first off, I'm going to give just a quick background of the organization, why trails are important to us, and Lindsay's going to provide some context to that, and we're going to talk a little about the history of wayfinding signage as well. So our organization was established back in 1978, and our mission is to raise awareness of Bellingham and Whatcom County as a year-round travel destination for economic vitality and community benefit. And what we have found over the almost 50 years that this organization has now existed is that outdoor recreation is what our area continues to be known for. And I think a lot of the presentations earlier today show that this is decades of work, that this has not happened by accident. And we continue to be known as that outdoor recreation hub, and the trail system is a very important part of the visitor experience. And what Lindsay is going to talk about now is that within our outdoor recreation spaces, there are certain designations that provide us with the ability to be recognized as a very special location within our location.
Yeah. Thank you. So one of the things that you are hopefully familiar with is the concept of designated scenic byways. So our beautiful roadworks are roadways that are destinations unto themselves because of their countless natural and environmental resources. So here in Whatcom County, we are lucky to be stewards of the Mount Baker Highway, designated scenic byway, and Chuckanet Drive. We also, due to the area that we have in the North Cascades Park, have a little bit of the Cascade Loop Highway as well in our county, which is great. And for the first time this year, Washington State Parks is putting together a program to offer some designated scenic bikeways. And so this is a program that is well established in a few other states in the country, including Oregon has a very thriving program for that. So it is coming to Washington State for the first time. And we have put forth this trail that we're honoring today as our designation. Sorry, my clicker's not working on these. So we got together to work with Todd and Elizabeth to submit the Salish Coast Trail as the Whatcom County Designated Scenic Bikeway. We submitted that application last week, and it was a great process to put together. Throughout that application, we got to elaborate a little bit about the cultural heritage benefits, the environmental benefits, and all the great parts on this trail that make it a wonderful thing for visitors and for locals. So just, as an example of why this trail is also great for biking, it was great to provide a couple of photos at the start and the midpoint and the end that show the different types of bikes that you can explore on there. And that's really the only thing that I'm here to kind of share with you today. We'll keep you updated as we go along. This is just a visual to show you that this is a 5-step process and we're just in step 1. So it's going to there's a limited number of bikeways that will be nominated in the state of Washington, but we feel confident that we have a very strong application, and we will let you know how it goes. And so I am going to tell you a little bit more about the marketing support that we provide. So at Visit Bellingham, we have a small suite of maps that we produce that are that show kind of a good visitor perspective, a historic perspective, things to do along all these designated areas. So an example of that is our Chuckanet Drive, our Mount Baker Highway, and then the Water Trails map. I think a lot of you have these maps in your businesses, but if you would like more, I'd be happy to get them to you so you can get them out to people. So we're excited in 2026 to create a trail map to support the development of this trail, and so we can have a multi-modal trail map system coming from the visitor's perspective as well. And we're also on board to help develop signage along the way to have a consistent branding kind of throughout a lot of our areas in town. And I'm going to pass it back to Dylan.
Thanks, Lindsay. And I'm just going to step back in time a little bit and talk about the County Wayfinding Initiative. Hasn't been talked about much, I think, recently, but back in 2017, and I know many in the room were involved in this, numerous partners from all across Whatcom County collaborated on a consultant-led regional wayfinding and signage plan, and that was developed by a company called Merge. And while that was several years ago, we think this Merge plan is still highly relevant and ready for implementation. Maybe not in exactly how it was initially thought of, but we really see some great value in the work that was done. And one of the strongest concepts, you can go to the next slide, Elizabeth, thanks, that we believe is important was this idea of having distinctive visitor regions within our county, because we are so geographically and culturally diverse that this kind of creates a unified design system that, again, reflects that natural character and community identity. And we're going to show you just a couple examples. While, again, this hasn't been implemented on a city or county-wide level, steps have been taken. First, kudos to City of Ferndale for working with Merge. Well done to implement some of the vehicular wayfinding signage as the first city in Whatcom County to do so. Furthermore, a couple new signs have been developed for both the scenic byways that Lindsay mentioned, and that was as a result of the update of the corridor management plans with Council of Governments we partnered with on, and part of the marketing into this was some new signage, which has those identifiers of the mountain region and the coastal region in there as well. Also on the screen here is a quick preview of the first iteration of potential of what some of the new signs could look like for the trail, just to give you an idea. So excited for next steps, and wanted to make sure we provide you with the history as well as what some of the new work will and or could look like. Thank you.
Thanks, Dylan. Everything just, we need to build that out a little bit better. Okay. Let's try the top. Yep. Over the years, we've have a lot of kids from, or young adults from Western come and meet with us to look for internships or jobs and all kinds of stuff. And one thing I just often say to them is, what do you want to be when you grow up? And so I think this is our next of what we want to be when we grow up, and as we morph as Recreation Northwest into really being your regional trail advocacy group. And so what I want to give now is a perspective on really what I've been looking at and we've been looking at over the past couple years for examples that we can follow and emulate. This is Cascade Bicycle Club. Hopefully you've heard of them. They really got their start in the 1970s, building a trail for me to ride on as a kid, the Burke-Gilman Trail. They are the nation's largest statewide bicycling nonprofit, currently serving 9,500 members, 45 professional staff, and 700 volunteers. This just came out recently. How many people have seen this documentary? I know Steve has. PBS, it's on PBS right now. Edward Norton is the narrator, and they go through and talk about the rail trails that have, not all of them, but that have been implemented throughout the country, and it's really cool that we get a nod here for Cascade because they talk about the Burke-Gilman and the barriers and successes that they had in building that. David, or how do you say your last name? Urbina, as you heard him introduce himself, he works for Cascade for Leafline, and it's really applaud to them to see how Cascade is looking to be regional. They, through this, represent 5 different counties, 4 different counties, sorry, and really are the glue bringing all these together. I put this slide in here to show the red. I appreciate that they're really trying to do all this and getting people out and identifying what exists and what doesn't. And even here on their website saying network completion. And just because it isn't complete, it doesn't mean they don't have people out there getting out and moving this work forward. Another one in the news in the last couple years is the Puget Sound to Pacific Partnership. This is a collaboration of multi-jurisdictions and different advocacy groups. Here's the 3 main advocacy groups that are working on this with the jurisdictions to get from basically Seattle out to the ocean. David we're new friends, and he's kind of advising me in this because of his work with Leafline. And so as I said, here's kind of what we're dreaming on, where we would like to end up. He said, look at forever green trails down in Pierce County. And so I appreciate that. And I'm going to use them kind of as a spotlight, as an advocacy model to follow, to give you an idea of the sense of scope and what they're able to do in Pierce County. This is off their website, more green and red lines, and what really their objective is. And I think that we can see how we're all in the room to make this happen just like this together. Here's the ways that they help. They put on events, they have programs, and they identify different projects that they work with their partners on. David fortunately told me just in time for me to be able to go down to Puyallup and attend their County Trail Conference, and it was just great to see very much similar people in the room, all very passionate about trails and working together with this community advocacy group to raise the money, the awareness, and get it across the finish line. This is just one example of what Forever Green does, is they pick a project and they work with their jurisdictional partners through what they call their Trail Accelerator Program, kind of like our WMBC's Adopt a Trail program. They just use this as a way to help raise money for special projects. Another group and another trail that I've been familiar with a long time is the Mountain Sound Greenway Trust. While this is a big national heritage area, there is a trail that goes through it, but it was really looking at the Mountain Sound Greenway is where I started getting more of these cultural heritage ideas in my head. And this is one great example of a cultural heritage trail. And according to the Google, cultural heritage trails are routes and paths that connect historically and culturally significant sites, such as buildings, monuments, and landscapes. And so here's an example of a cultural trail that exists in Port Townsend, where the tribes worked with locals to really create an experience that's not only for walking and biking, but it's actually a driving trail to go around Port Townsend. And the Chimahan Trail chronicles the history of the Sklallam people and the European settlers as they worked to coexist. So I think we've heard that throughout today, and I think we're all on the same page in trying to move us towards creating that cultural heritage experience as we connect our communities through these trails and these routes. I'm not going to read off the slide. That's just for you guys to soak in. So now, how far have we gotten? What have we accomplished? I really see these as some of our major milestones towards adopting the Coast Millennium Trail. Back in 24, when Gina and we presented to Greenways in the COG. Big shout out for bullet number 2. We're here, we're doing it. This is awesome. I hope you guys feel me on that. Our partnership and our green light with Whatcom County, our partnership with Bellingham Whatcom County Tourism and applying for that nomination and having that in. I'm delighted for our partnership with the Whatcom Museum. We went to them early as well to be at the table to say, we're not the cultural heritage experts. You guys hold our history. How can we work together to get that out of the museum and onto the trail and make that connection between the two? So thank you, Maria, for being here and your willingness to work with us in this. And then also for all the folks that I've met over the last month or so, making new friends and new connections, and looking forward to creating these new partnerships to bring all this work together. Oh, one more milestone. I forgot to write it down. As we were working on the High Bridge, one thing that Gina said, she gave me a laundry list of things to do, and one thing was get a draft scope of work. And so shout out to Herrera and Neil Shaner. If you're familiar with Herrera's work, you saw a slide of theirs up earlier. Their staff volunteered their time to do a draft scope of work for us to really get a sense of the complexity and the comprehensiveness of what it would take to build that bridge. So thank you also to Herrera, and I'll add that to my slide. This is really our draft scope of work. This hasn't been vetted. It's just kind of where my thoughts are around this. Just like Forever Green, here's where I see us having the opportunity to do work. In advocacy, I think it starts with this. Our next step is to build more of a coalition of supporters, some of which are in this room, beyond the jurisdictional representatives, and then work to activate the public to let them know that this is really still a thing. Most people haven't heard of the Coast Millennium Trail. When they do, they pretty quickly turn around and say the Coast Millennial, which is really weird. I'm really excited about the name change because I have a hard time spelling that word after 3 years of trying to do it. Infrastructure, these are just examples that I see as Lane and Bennett pointed them out. These are the priorities for the county and the city, and so how can we, as this public advocacy group, work with them to get the word out, help support funding, different things like that. Those are just some of the projects that were outlined earlier. And then the biggest and first one where we're really going to start is looking at signage. And I'm going to speak about that in a little bit. Oh, right now. So really our next steps in this are updating the name, getting input and feedback from our stakeholders to see if we're all in agreement with that, and then work on route wayfinding and trailhead signs. As Lindsay said, we're hoping some of that support comes out of that scenic bikeway nomination, and then also out of that build a tourism map as an asset. And so, as you read, like, I hope you didn't expect this was going to be a work session and we're going to draw lines on maps. Really, this is a first point in time for us to get that plan started. And so, working with Bennett and Nicole, we will be convening all the stakeholders to make sure we're basically all on the same page to identify where the current trail alignment is so we can move forward with installing signs and then creating a map that we can hand out as a tourism asset. Those are my bullet points. And so for us, we are willing to serve as your public partners, as agents for change, for collective impact, for regional trail development. I'm really looking forward to connecting people, motivating people, and energizing people. And this is what I see as our next steps, is to work to adopt the Coast Millennium Trail with your blessing, and move this stuff forward. That's what I got, folks.
I was thinking about just how critical it could be if we could get this thing adopted and signed. We could sign a good portion of the trail if we include all the on-street routes, maybe in time for the World Cup. I'm happy to answer any questions while I'm up here.
So I'm thinking about opportunities for volunteers to do some of this work. I mean, we kind of visualize, heavy machinery and asphalt and concrete, but really a lot of this stuff can just be, pretty simple clearing, grubbing, and throwing gravel down. And volunteers are great with that. Give them a shovel and a wheelbarrow, and we can go to town. And in that vein, on the Bay to Baker, I guess it was shortly after we got going in the early 90s, we were approached by the Nooksack School District. A couple of teachers wanted to take kids out to do a community project, a service project, and so we got them out to work on the Bay to Baker Trail out at Boulder Creek. And so if you've been out there, just on the other side of the bridge, east side of the bridge, there's a bit of the old railroad grade that goes along for about a little over a mile, I think, before you hit this major washout where the river took the grade away. But we thought, well, we'll do 2 days. We'll have half the kids. I think they were, I want to say fourth graders, maybe, fourth, fifth, something like that. And we'll have half of them work on Saturday and half on Sunday. And we'll clear out this stretch of the trail. The first group came in on Saturday. They did the whole thing in one day. And so we had to kind of put the rest of the kids to work on sort of, cosmetic stuff, kind of fixing it up. But the teachers came back and said, the kids that are the hardest to work with in school, the ones that make trouble or the ones that just don't pay attention, whatever, they did the best work. They just were so inspired to be out there and to see the results of what they could do, with a pair of pruners and, and a shovel or a hoe or something. And that's really valuable stuff. And I think not only does it, save a few bucks on getting construction done, but it really builds that support and, can change kids' lives. And I was thinking about this this morning, actually, and I thought those kids that helped us on that trail, they probably have kids of the same age by now. And so we can get them out there too. So my question is, are we going to accommodate volunteers in these projects?
Yes. You want to say yes? Captain Richard Sturgill. If you don't know who this gentleman, I'm going to let you say more first.
For the stakeholders, how do we, say with the signage, how do we what's the timeline where we can give you some, provide some ideas or suggestions?
That's a great question. I mean, I think I'm excited to follow up after this meeting. I think we're going to need to strategize on next steps. So I think now would be a great time to share anything you have in terms of what you see as next steps. So Richard, to that point, I mean, I think we're hearing that you want to have some feedback on what that looks like, and I think we need to take that back and meet and consider that. So I don't have an answer exactly, but I think we're going through an evolutionary process here. So that's what I would say is we would take that back and look to follow up with the group shortly.
Yeah, my anticipation is we'll be having more specific meetings in January. Yep. This is our first step to be able to get the green light to help move this forward and then help start facilitating those meetings.
You've shared with the group what you can do, what your benefit is to this group, and amplifying and catalyzing and energizing advocates. What can this group of agencies and Public Works Department staff and Parks Department staff do to help you and support you as an advocacy organization that is trying to champion this work? What do you need? What resources do you need from this group to move this work forward?
We're working on a plan. Oh, geez, I sound like someone else. That's the best I can say right now. The biggest thing is, what can you do to help? This is a great start. And please keep showing up to meetings that you're invited to, whether it's with the county, with the city, with us collaborating as a whole. And just, I think if anything, hopefully you feel like this is part of a community and that we're all in this together and we have some projects ahead that hopefully aren't going to wait till someone else's kids are grown up and, yeah.
I really do want to stress the commitment of county parks to process. So, we are working to have a planner. I actually just confirmed an offer, just going out today. So hopefully we'll have some word on that in the near term. But, once we're looking to build capacity so that we can get back to you and establish a structure. I think, we have to develop a relationship with Recreation Northwest. And so there is a process of strategic planning that we need to go through with you all as key partners. So, I mean, there's a commitment there to do that. I think what I'm excited about today is just the turnout, the enthusiasm, and now we want to follow through on commitment to make it happen. So that's a commitment. I don't think we have the planning. We're taking the first steps, at least from the county's perspective. I mean, kudos to the city for everything they've done. They're leading the way and giving us the incentive to make these connections. So, I mean, I'm just really excited. This turnout is fantastic.
Thanks, Bennett. Mr. Delacour.
Just a quick mention from Carol and me, how appreciative we are for Recreation Northwest and the proven ability of your organization, Todd, to bring together a diverse group of interested, constructive parties, jurisdictions, tribes, development, economic development, et cetera. Just fantastic. Really appreciate this big step.
Thanks, Todd, so much for organizing and everybody at Recreation Northwest. Fantastic afternoon of getting everybody on board and up to speed and of all the fantastic work you guys are doing. I'll just relay for the group, because Todd and I were chatting a little bit during the break about one of the great opportunities in doing meetings like this is connecting those relationships, because obviously grant pursuits are part of the way that we get a lot of this work done. This is speaking from the WSDOT behalf. And so yeah, I mean, it's great to have you here as a community partner along here with the jurisdictions and the various land management agencies that have, can bring us together to look for those opportunities and pursue grants together, because obviously that makes for stronger pursuits and applications. I am going to ask a question that I hope isn't putting anybody too much on the spot, but certainly, certainly at WSDOT, as we have more trails and active transportation facilities coming into state right-of-way as part of our implementation of the Complete Streets Law, we are having new conversations about maintenance and how we maintain facilities like this. So I'm curious if there have been conversations about that yet. I know this is very early in the process for some of these longer regional trails, but even just for some of the pieces you're talking about, because obviously there are lots of grant dollars out there to build new, ribbon cuttings like we got to see earlier, fantastic shiny opportunities. But it's often on us as the locals to take care of them. And so I'm just wondering if those conversations have come about yet. And that's obviously where we heard the conversation earlier about, volunteer power, always a great option. But, again, just that there's a lot as we continue to build our system that we need to take care of so they continue to be usable.
If you didn't hear what Chris said, he said, "Oh, good, I'm looking forward to this answer."
So, I'm not sure I'm going to have the most satisfying answer. I will say, as it relates to Kindle Trail, for instance, I think obviously where we are today versus where we were a year and a half ago in terms of county budget is an interesting question we could talk about in about an hour. So as it relates to Kindle Trail, I mean that's a process that's probably going to take 3 years to be constructed. When WashDOT came to us and said to the county and said, we're looking to move this forward. We need a commitment from the county that you will maintain that trail as part of the Bay to Baker. We made that commitment because we want to make sure the Kindle Trail went forward. We don't have the answer on how it's going to happen just yet. Yeah, that's the part Chris knows. And I want to speak to I came from a jurisdiction where we did not have a levy. It's a process to build capacity. And we're in that process. We're taking not the first step. We've had a year's worth of steps here to get to this point today. We have maintenance in our head. We know we need to build capacity. We know we need to build relationships with nonprofits that generate support in the community that comes back into us in terms of potential funding, but certainly community support for how we can then build that funding. So we're in that process. So I don't have a great answer on, certainly right now we have segments that are maintained by the city of Blaine or the neighborhood association, or, and that's kind of how the current, sorry, it's not up there, but the Coast Millennium Trail is being maintained out in the county. Public Works maintains the berm. We actually, as a county, we're responsible for the interurban. We maintain that. So it's a dispersed model for maintenance right now. But that's part of the planning that we're going through. Bay to Baker, a little bit different story. We do have opportunities for volunteer work on Bay to Baker, and we have some new staff capacity that is going to be responsible for that. So some of that maintenance, but that's not maintaining the future Bay to Baker, which is going to be hopefully a paved multi-modal path that has a higher standard of care that we may need to develop some capacity for. So that's what I would say. It's a process, and we're committed to that process.
Bennett? Okay, I'm going to answer your question again, David. How can you support us? We are looking for new board members. That's kind of at the big commitment level, but also there's a handful of you in this room that we've also invited to be on an advisory committee, and we really see that as a good start to start working with our organization. If you're not familiar with us, you guys have the expertise in the room, and I'm really going to lean on you for that, is to help teach me. I'm not a transportation planner. You've seen the work that we've done, but I'm really going to rely on you guys to help educate me in how we can have valuable partnerships in this. Thank you all so much. Thank you.